This is the presentation for Topic 6, Project Completion. It's a part of the subject Building Contract Administration. This presentation is merely a summary of the study guide and shouldn't be considered a substitute. This slide here, I've identified 4 areas of the project, which we've got the construction, when the building is underway and being built, practical completion, which we're going to be talking about now, the defects period, which is that 12 months between practical completion and final completion, and the final completion. Now, practical completion is where a lot of things start coming together with handing over of the project for people to move in and the tenants to start taking their possession. The practical completion is a very busy time with looking at what defects are likely to be there. It's a time when really getting that defects inspection and control system and monitoring process in place is really important. Once the tenants and once the occupiers are in the building, it's very hard to say, well, no, that's the builder's responsibility. Some of those defects, scratches, pieces of equipment and plant that aren't working correctly could easily be perceived as being the owner and building occupier's problem. So although there's a long list of things that need to be considered at practical completion, it's a time when really the builder's liability for liquidated damages cease. So the threat of him actually finishing late and that costing him money, that time actually is over with. Practical completion also, he doesn't need to insure the works anymore, and so the release of part of the retentions of monies also becomes available, and this is when the defects period occurs as well. It's that 12-month period between practical and final, where anything that the building actually goes through a 12-month period. So that ensures that all the services and the building actually responds to the 4 seasons of the year. The mechanical equipment, the air conditioning equipment, that can be tweaked. All those issues that can be further fleshed out where there's likely to be problems where they weren't either built correctly or maybe the design wasn't fully considered for occupancy. So that 12-month period is really important. One of my pets during and also looking at contractors when I go onto contracting sites is looking at how clean they keep the site. And keeping the site clean has a number of different benefits. One of them is that it's a very efficient way then of keeping the site safe for workers to move through. It makes it easy to identify places where you can temporarily store equipment and things like that and materials. It's a workplace health and safety issue in a lot of ways. Demobilisation and also it stops the possibility of having defects, nicks, dings, scrapes, parts of finished products that really need to be kept protected. It is easier if the site's kept clean. So the site, before it's actually handed over a practical completion, there's a final clean too. And in most cases, there's a contribution by all the trades, all the subcontractors involved in the job to actually take their rubbish away. And if that's not going to happen, then in those cases, they can be it's a good practice to warn them. And if they don't actually do that, then to actually have someone else clean that area and clean their waste away and recharge them. So a practical completion, the process is the builder notifies that the works are practical and ready for occupancy, and that all the correct certification and compliances are in place, that there's no outstanding items, no written notices on outstanding items, and that there's the work is satisfies all of the compliance issues for that practical certificate of occupancy to be issued. Now, defects, as I mentioned earlier, these can be really costly if not managed very well. It's important to keep the documentation of them up to date from both sides, both being the builder and also being a client or a client's representative. As the documentation quite often is an accurate schedule, as well as maybe photos or drawings marked up as well where the defects are, when they were identified, what needs to be done, and an inspection, and on the schedule then marking off when they have been attended to and completed and both parties are satisfied. Needs a good team, and they need to be pretty conscientious in achieving an outcome on these. The handover documentation is extremely important, particularly for those that are maintaining the building and taking ownership of the building. As I've identified here, they include final accounting, the defects lists and information there, guarantees and warranties, and any information need to be considered in sectional and partial completion. So this documentation flow, as I've shown in this diagram here, is extremely important because the afterlife, it's the data reuse there on the right-hand side, where the facilities managers, building operators and maintainers and owners will need that information. So the design, all of that information up through the data creation and collection into the building process, which is used to communicate and actually the information in putting together the building, then needs to be established in a presentable and a logical format for the building operation and maintenance. So part of the information that needs to be handed over is the warranties and certificates, and these are extremely important in the short term for the builder, definitely, because if he has to return to a project for waterproofing which has failed, and if the certification isn't in place and the paperwork not there, well then he's going to have to meet the cost to rectify, and that can be quite extensive in some cases. Down the line, yes, the building owner and the person maintaining the building wants to know that okay, this is within the 10-year guarantee period, and I'm really going to have to exercise the warranty now. So the defects liability period, it's a period usually 12 months, and in that 12-month period, any defects and faults that are identified in the building or the services are to be completed and rectified by the builder. As I mentioned earlier, it's that period where commissioning of all the building services and the hard structure in the building as well that is commissioned, and it can be further fine-tuned to, so it actually performs the way it was intended in its original design. It's also important, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, that the building is now occupied and running for one whole year, so that all 4 seasons the building's actually being occupied and working now, fully operational, so it can respond to the building quality under rain, cold, heat, different sun angles. So again, seeing how the building design, that it's actually been used and operated and is responding to how it was originally intended. The defects period's also important because it'll find faults then due to daily usage too. So there would be a lot of locks installed in a very large building, lights, that type of thing. And regardless of how thorough an inspection process can be made for looking for defects before handing over a practical completion, it's very likely that the occupants of the building are going to find out more because they're using that space for longer periods. They're in that office for 8 to 10 hours at a time. So if there's a problem with time clocking or lights not working correctly, then it's definitely going to be picked up. So the slides moved on to final completion. Now, if we consider final completion, as I said earlier, that's the end of the defects period. So it's 12 months after the building's been occupied. Usually, that can sometimes be delayed due to defects, and if that's the case, there's other commercial changes that need to be considered in the final account possibly as well. This is an extremely important time in the contract, as this is when retentions and all bank guarantees are going to be released. The final account, which makes up all the variations on the project and any cost adjustments, are now finalised, and it's extremely important because now the builder has no more contractual obligations on this project. So now we've completed the presentation for project completion, and it's a good opportunity now for you to go back and read over the study guide again, refer to the subject text or course textbooks, and work through the workbook activities for this particular topic. If you've got any questions, you can post it to the student group forum or email me.